I want to invite you into an exploration into responsibility. And when I say responsibility, I'm referring to evolving our consciousness together and exploring our inner worlds, creating deeper connection. And I want to stand for a culture which is based in higher levels of responsibility. And what I mean by higher levels of responsibility is I want to take care of a culture which, you know, takes care of itself, where I'm not reliant and expecting society or my parents or others around me to take care of me, because that would be more of a childlike state. And this is what we are seeing so much in society. This is what I am seeing so much around me all the time. And I see this in the adults around me. I see this in my parents. I mean, that's what comes to mind first is just because they're an adult in an adult body, it doesn't mean they're acting or behaving or have been initiated into high levels of responsibility. You know, to when I started to be aware and witness that just because they're an adult, it doesn't mean that they're not acting like a child a lot of the time. You know, if they're emotionally upset, then going into this reactivity. It's like, why did you do this to me? Or why is this happening to me? You know, this is everyone else's fault that my life is like this. Or I see it in my dad and other men around me is when they get angry and go into this reactivity, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to relate to their anger. And it comes out in reactivity, in this rage, which is it is violent. And it makes me angry because that level of unconscious, irresponsible anger does lead to violence. And that ultimately leads to war where millions of people get hurt. And I see this in leaders around the world, like right now, watching the irresponsible leaders of the world wage war on each other because ultimately they're they still have child levels of responsibility. It's like, you did this to me. Well, look what I can do back to you. Look what I can do back to your nation. These are the rules of engagement. If you don't behave like the way I want you to, then you're going to get punished in this way. Well, you know what? Behave like I want you to, and I'll reward you in this way. Don't you see that happening with nations going at each other in this childlike levels of responsibility? And what if, you know, they, or what if you were to feel what it would be like to be in a higher level, in a radical level of responsibility, which would mean I take a stand for creating culture that looks into how we can share responsibility together. That is the kind of culture that I want to live in the spaces that I live. And it brings me a lot of joy because I want to do it with you. I want to discover with you. I want to create with you. You know? And let's start right now. I invite you, make a list this week of where you still have child level of responsibility playing out, where you're still reactive, where you're still going into the victim or the persecutor. You know, oh, the society's fault. You know, whatever's happening, to me is someone else's fault, or they deserve to get punished. And how about, like, I look at the choices that I make, or I look at, when I'm speaking to myself, what choices am I making day to day, minute to minute, which are leading to my life being in a certain way? Well, I can tell you that I feel so much more joy when I actually take responsibility of my choices, even the tiniest ones. When I decide that I'm going to look after my emotional state, I'm not going to wait for someone else to take care of it for me, that I'm going to find ways to feel more love in my life without expecting someone else to do it. This is the kind of levels of responsibility that excites me and that I want to journey with you on that. So I invite you this week, start noticing where your child levels of responsibility are playing out. Maybe write them down. And how do they make you feel? Do they make you feel angry? Do they make you feel sad? Do they perhaps bring you joy? That's okay. Or fear? Let's not label them as good or bad. Just notice what's going on. And then how could you take higher levels of responsibility for each of those, or radical levels, to empower yourself and empower those around you in these spaces? Instead of immediately going into the victim, what's another approach? What's another doorway? And I encourage you to share that with others, family, friends, or myself, or your community, how you are exploring taking different levels of responsibility in your life. And I will do the same.